Cultural Bias in Teaching by Rodrigo Diaz, Genesis Muhammad, Nicole Little, and Raquel Fine. Next slide. Gender bias. As educators, we must become inclusive in our classrooms. We can make sure that there is an even participation among the children. All students have something to contribute to the growth and development of the class. There are times where we experience gender bias when we believe that boys are better than girls in math, or even where girls have fewer opportunities to engage in decisions. Next slide. In my experience, the cultural bias of general education is different than the culture of special education. In general education, students are taught their lessons at a different pace than special education. Students and are expected to retain the information, where in special education, students' lessons are slowed down for better retention. There are personal plans written out for special education students, and there are teachers that have their preference of teaching general education because of this. Next slide.
So cultural bias and how it relates to minorities, specifically in the STEM field, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So it's known pretty much across the board that women and people of color are underrepresented in the STEM fields, STEM-related fields, whether that be in schools, in like higher education, and also in the actual fields themselves, professional fields. And this happens for a variety of reasons, and a couple of them are that teachers sometimes have implicit cultural biases, which can shape their expectations of students and can lead to racial gaps in academic achievement and engagement. And these unconscious biases can affect teachers' decision making when placing minorities in advanced mathematics and science courses. And unfortunately, it can also lead to a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where the decision making and the grading of teachers is biased a little bit against minorities and people of color. And eventually those students in turn are influenced, and their self-identity and academic performance is reflective of that unconscious bias, which is really unfortunate. Thinking of general or this cultural bias and how it relates to women specifically, so more of a gender bias in STEM, women only make up about 20%, 28% of the workforce in the STEM fields. And some things that Genesis had mentioned, like our math anxiety or the math brain thing, where boys are recognized to quote unquote be better at math than girls, which has absolutely no biological background whatsoever. It just seems to be this thing that we've all agreed it was a thing over time, the stereotype that we've adopted, along with ability stereotypes that happens to minorities as well, where women and minorities are viewed as not as good in these science and technology fields as maybe men or white people versus people of color. Another thing was fewer role models. Women and people of color don't seem to see role models in these STEM fields, and so they think maybe these fields are not for them. It's a very male-dominated culture. And there are a few ideas of how we can fix this, like building supportive relationships with our students and improving STEM education so that we talk about more STEM careers and kids get to see role models that look like them, show our students people of color in the STEM fields, show young girls, women in these STEM fields, and show them that it's not just a male-dominated society, that everybody can do science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
All right, cultural bias and English language learners. Classrooms are becoming more diverse with increasing numbers of children with cultural and linguistic differences known as English language learners. English language learners are being misidentified as having learning disabilities when their problems are due to cultural or linguistic differences. Next slide, please. How can examples of cultural bias? I believe that English language learners are less intelligent than others based on their accent or fluency in English. Also, assessments, they're being assessed with problematic language that does not reflect accurate representation of what they are learning. Also, ELL students are being placed on a special education programs, even though they do not belong there. Next slide. How can we make classes more inclusive for English language learners? Creating a comfortable and positive learning environment, uh, differentiating instruction for the student to be supported, to encourage the student to participate in a way the child feels comfortable, not forcing him in verbal participation. Also, to modify the speech, gestures with your speech, adjust questioning techniques to the appropriate stage of proficiency for the student. Also, adapting tests and assessments, allowing the student to have a bilingual dictionary when taking a test, maybe a cheat sheet, giving the student extra time, and also simplifying the language in the test. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. So I'm going to talk about how to overcome cultural bias in teaching. So no matter what, no matter where we come from, even if we think we do not, we all bring biases into the classroom. And unfortunately, it's those unconscious cultural biases that really cause the great achievement gap with minority students. But luckily, there are ways that we can recognize those unconscious cultural biases and really change it in the classroom. So research, at least at the research I have found, suggests that different things we can do is just spending time as a teacher. We should make the time to spend with people that aren't like ourselves to help us better understand students that come from different backgrounds, different cultures. And then just after, we recognize those biases, things that we can physically do in the classroom are, recognize holidays, national events that honor minorities. Of course, there's Martin Luther King Day, recognizing Autism Awareness Month. And then another thing we can do is make sure classroom games and activities are inclusive. That way they can cater to students with all types of disabilities. And then, of course, I think the best thing we can do as teachers is just getting to know our students through little icebreaker games, asking them to write personal essays about themselves. Because, of course, if we do not get to know our students, not get to know the cultures that they come from and their backgrounds, we cannot, do our best in avoiding those cultural biases in the classroom. And I think that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much.